They told us just sell everything and move to El Salvador. Shipping stuff isn't worth the time or the effort or the money, but we didn't listen to them. Are you thinking about bringing all your belongings to El Salvador too? We'll go through the whole process with you in this video, and you can make the best decision for yourselves. Was this the biggest mistake we've ever made? Stay tuned. Buenas tardes, mis amigos, and benedicciones para todos ustedes. Good afternoon, my friends, and blessings to you all. I'll cover all the basics in this video with you so you don't make the same mistakes that we did. First up is, how do you bring your stuff to El Salvador or potentially anywhere else in Latin America? These tips could probably be useful for any country in this region. There are many ways to bring your things into El Salvador. First is the easiest one. It's the airline. When we were looking to come to El Salvador, we were thinking about getting 2 extra checked bags. Now, we flew with Avianca, and Avianca had a 3 checked bag limit. We did do 1 extra check bag, so we each had 2 check bags, but we could have done 3. And if you only had that much to bring, our family is 5 people, that's 15 big check bags, plus the carry-on. Now, 3 of our carry-ons were cats, but I mean, if you're not bringing all the cats, maybe you have 5 carry-ons and you could potentially have 15 bags if you have a family of 5 like ours. And that may be enough for what you need to bring to start over in a new country. Now, there are many things you cannot bring on airplanes, especially with the check bags in the hold of the plane. And in particular, batteries is a big item. So be very careful of what you're trying to bring. We wanted to bring power tools, and then the batteries, I think it was max 2 batteries per bag, and they think they had to be an individual, like a Ziploc bag, so they couldn't touch each other. There are lots of different rules and restrictions that airlines have about what you can and cannot bring. And we looked at the battery policy with Avianca for our power tools, drones, cameras, and a robot vacuum. Now, we reviewed that policy in particular for the robot vacuum because that was going to be in the checked bag. And it met all the requirements for Avianca. However, Avianca took the vacuum cleaner out of my bag, stole it, and refuses to give it back. Well, actually, they say they don't have it anymore, and they refuse to reimburse me for my vacuum that they stole and then lost. It's taken months to go through this process with them, so this could happen to you too, that something is in your bag that gets removed. What happened was, in the Montreal airport, the group called CATSA, C-A-T-S-A, they go through all your bags and they leave a little card and it says, we searched your bag and we did something. Sometimes it says we didn't take anything out, which they did for 2 of our bags that had our security cameras, as well as I think the drone might have been in one of those bags or something else was in the bag. And the one with the robot vacuum, they put the card in there and said they did remove the robot vacuum. Ironically, I don't know how many people travel with robot vacuums, but they told me they found the robot vacuum when it was being held. And when I said, well, can you get it to El Salvador? Because I'm not coming back. They said, oh, somebody's picked up the robot vacuum, and they had all the proper paperwork. I'm thinking, how many people travel with robot vacuums in August through Montreal? I don't know. I feel like they gave my robot vacuum away and refused to admit it. So I lost my beloved robot vacuum. So focus, Charity, focus. We're on a different video right now, right? Now, I watched a couple of YouTubers that moved to different places, Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. One couple that moved to Nicaragua actually had these very large black totes with the yellow lids like you get at Costco that you kind of zip tie down. They use that to travel to Nicaragua, and they, I think, flew into Mexico first, and they had to go through customs there, and then out to Nicaragua after that. So if your airline allows that, that may be another way to bring some bigger things that don't necessarily fit in a suitcase. Or there's also cargo. We looked at Avianca Cargo. Avianca is the direct flight from where we were to here. If you wanted to fly with a couple of carriers and go through the States, but then there was a process of bringing the cats through the States and the kids and the delays and the connecting flights. So it may not be convenient for you, but maybe it is. Maybe your situation is different. Maybe it is more convenient to fly into the States because that airline can take bigger cargo or whatnot, right? Or maybe you just drive over to the States and you catch your plane there, depending on where you live in Canada, or maybe you live in the States already and you have many options to get to El Salvador. So just check with your airline carrier to see what their options are for either extra baggage or basically like a parcel. If you're bringing a tote or something in a box, something like that, because it may just be a few $100 extra and you could have those beloved items that you really want to bring with you to start over in a new country. Now, one of the options we have in Canada is to move things through a barrel through the port in Montreal. I have someone's contact information, so if you're interested in that, let me know. He told me that the barrels are about 240 to 280 pounds per 50-gallon drum, I guess. And I think it's $350 USD, or it was when I had looked when we lived in Canada. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I'll get his contact information to you. Another option without doing a full shipping container is what they call an LTL, and it's less than a full load. So maybe you have a pallet of things you're looking to bring. And we looked into this too. We even thought about bringing basically a pallet on the plane. That's the Avianca cargo angle we were looking at. There are carriers that do this, but I'm not really familiar with that. I'm just telling you it is an option out there. I can't really give you much more on that because we didn't go that way, and I didn't look into it much further because I knew that we were going to have a lot more than a pallet once we kind of decided what we were doing. So the last option is a shipping container, and it really comes down to the size. There's a 20-foot shipping container that holds 10 pallets, and there's a 40-foot shipping container that holds 20 pallets. Now a pallet, we have a pallet actually right beside me. I have a pallet. That pallet was 42 inches by 48 inches. They're all roughly around that, and about 7.5 feet tall is about sort of your height limit depending on your container. Containers come 8 feet or 8.5 feet tall, so you want to be a little under because you got to get, there's a lip a little bit down from where the doors close. So you have to get under the lip and then into the container. You can't have it right to the top ceiling part of the container, or else you're not going to get your pallet inside. And I think if you've seen our video, you might have seen what happened with one of our pallets that got taken apart. If you didn't, you can go back and watch that video when we unloaded the shipping container. One of the pallets at the very end was taken apart. It was no longer on the pallet and probably was a little bit too tall. That's, I think, what happened. Or maybe it was too wide. I'm not sure. But they did take one apart to put it in the container. Now, the price per square foot is most expensive the smaller you go, right? If you're talking airline and you're getting an extra suitcase, how many square feet is an extra suitcase for $100, right? If you're looking at the barrel, you're getting a 50-gallon drum, $350, or a pallet or less than a full load. Price per square foot is always higher the smaller you go. The most economical is a 40-foot shipping container. You're getting, again, 20 pallets. And that is the best price per square foot. Keep this in mind when you're costing out the ways that you can ship your stuff. Next is about picking a shipping company. Now, you know we went with a shipping company to bring our container. So the other options, I'm not a professional at because I didn't go that way except the extra bags with the Avianca. This was the best option for our situation. As I said, it all has to do with price per square foot. And because we decided we had a lot of stuff we need to bring, we went with the bigger container. I started to Google Spreadsheet when we first started looking at shipping companies, and I'm going to link that below in the description. I made it shareable, so if you have the link, you can look at it. It had all the shipping companies that I contacted. Now, some of them didn't get back to me. I think I'll get into those reasons a little bit later on. I didn't know what the reasons were at the beginning, but I did find out later on. And the other ones that did get back to me, I put down the notes and comments. And if I had a contact person directly or an email or website, I put all that in there. You guys can peruse at your leisure and call those people if this is something you're interested in too. Just know the company we went with is not on the list. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. For those of you that have been following our journey to El Salvador way back in the summer of 2023, you know that we made a friend here. He goes by the name of Stan, and he was our driver, and he drove us all around last year when we came for our scouting trip, and we stayed in touch with them over the last year. We sent messages back and forth, memes back and forth, whatever it was. We kept in touch doing voice calls and just letting him know what our plans were and how things were going. And he happened to run into an old coworker of his who was just starting a shipping company business with a lawyer friend. So he gave us that information when he found out about it. I think it was around the spring of 2024. So we reached out to him and we started conversations with him. Now, one of the people is Ricardo and one of them is Diego. And Diego doesn't speak any English. So Ricardo was doing the translating on one of our calls, and then Ricardo's wife did the translation on our second call. And we decided based on that we would go with them and their company, which I'll put on the screen now. What made it really hard about getting a quote was because they wanted to know how much stuff, like how many pallets you would need and the weight of everything, and then what you were bringing. And every shipping company I talked to, I just said, well, we're bringing our household goods and I don't know how much we need. So I could have said we had a 4,000 square foot house, that's 6 bedrooms and a 4,000 square foot garage, but we weren't taking all that stuff. We were downsizing. So I didn't really know how much we would need. Do we need a 20 foot? Do we need a 40 foot? Maybe less than a full load, which I'm pretty sure we knew that wasn't going to happen. But I didn't know till 2 days before we left that we only needed a 20-foot shipping container. Like that's how I really didn't understand the volume of stuff we had until it was put on the pallets itself. So I need to give you a little disclaimer. We met Diego and Ricardo when we came to El Salvador. We had to give them our 50% down for the container, and we really, really liked them. In fact, we liked them so much that we decided to go into a second business with them and their wives. And it's really a women-led business. It's really women helping women in many aspects, and I cannot wait to tell you more about this in the new year. So we became good friends with them very fast, and it really was through this process of hiring them to do our shipping container. And at that time, that was the cheapest quote we had. When they give you a quote, it really is the shipping. Some people say we do a door-to-door service, and that was extra for the door-to-door. Some people say we'll help you pack. That's an extra service. But for us to do our packing and just the shipping, and that was really what the quote was about. We didn't have an address of where things were going to go to when we got to El Salvador. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on, because we didn't know when we got here where our stuff was going to go. So we had to come up with a few options there as well. And Ricardo and Diego helped us the whole way. So the quote was really just getting our stuff from our warehouse to El Salvador. And at that point, we'd have to decide where it was going to go at that point. And then those things would cost extra, of course. So our biggest challenge, and strangest challenge really, was the fact that we were shipping household goods. I didn't really quite understand why this was, but ever since the pandemic, shipping companies are not really doing household goods for some reason. And this is what I understand from what the stories are, is that people ship stuff to wherever they were leaving their country to go to, and they would abandon it at the port. Maybe the taxes and tariffs were so high that they chose, I don't really need that stuff after all, I'm just going to leave it there. And now this is a financial burden to the people that shipped it, because now they have to empty out that container, and the people at the port, because now the stuff is in their country, and now what do you do with it? Do we auction it off, or do they store it, or what are the rules? I have no idea, but I'm just telling you, nobody wanted to ship household goods. This was the strangest thing I've seen. The company that we picked knew we were bringing household goods, so they had a company lined up to pick our stuff up at the warehouse and then bring it to the port in Montreal to then be shipped with, I think they're called freight forwarders. The people that leave the port go to the next port as a freight forwarder. So they already had all that lined up. Well, this became our last and biggest challenge, was that the company they had lined up to pick up our stuff at the warehouse to go to the port in Montreal, well, they backed out at the last second. And then we were scrambling, because we were already in El Salvador at that point, and we were scrambling to help find another company to bring our stuff to the port. Now, our stuff was in a warehouse, so the first people I called were the people at the warehouse to see if they could bring our items from the warehouse to the port. And they didn't do that service, but they did give me a contact for somebody who did move household goods. And when I contacted them, they said no. It was, okay, I know you moved them, but apparently not to the port. I don't know what the real reason was, but they said no. And then I contacted a few more people, and when the guys emailed me back, he said, "Thank you for your inquiry, but unfortunately, we do not ship personal effects." Again, this is that whole thing with that pandemic and people abandoning. And it's weird, because all they had to do was bring it to the port. The people that were taking it from port to port, they had no problem with bringing the personal effects. So this became a challenge. And we were already in El Salvador, at our Airbnb, thinking, oh my gosh, now our stuff is trapped in our warehouse in Smiths Falls. So that's awful. What are we going to do with our stuff? So I finally found another company called Page Logistics, and it's in my spreadsheet. If you look that up, you'll see that in the spreadsheet. And they were really good, and they said that they would bring it to the port. When our company here called the port to see what is a good date for Page Logistics to bring the stuff to the port, they said, oh, well, we can come pick up your stuff at the warehouse. I was like, oh my gosh, why wasn't that an option at the very beginning then? Why were we jumping through these hoops? But that's just how things are. And Page Logistics had actually a cheaper quote than we were originally given from our company, because I think they said it was $19.50 to get it from the warehouse to the port, and Page Logistics said $17.50. So I did tell them that, if the company that's at the port's going to come get it, make sure they're not charging any more than $17.50, because we could get Page Logistics to take it cheaper if that's the case. So we didn't end up using Page Logistics, but the guy I talked to was Paul, and we had lots of emails back and forth, because everyone always wants to know, why are you leaving Canada? If you want to get something to the port, maybe you could try Page Logistics as well. And then you just have to deal with getting from port to port at that point. So that was our last and biggest challenge. So let's go back to the beginning to what our first challenges were. So the first biggest challenge is the fact that we were bringing household goods. And when you bring stuff into a port, customs needs to know a dollar value for everything. And these are our used household goods, the stuff that we were using for many, many years. Sometimes, I have a 1930 sewing machine in a cabinet. I mean, that wasn't bought yesterday. So we had to put a dollar value on everything for customs to be able to accept it. And if the customs agents don't like the dollar value you put, they do have a book value that they can use. So Ricardo and Diego went with us through our spreadsheet many, many times to make sure we're following the rules. The rules, none of these rules are written down, so it's really hard to follow rules when they're not all written down. But I'm going to give you all of the advice that we were given, and you'll learn from our mistakes, basically. The first big hurdle was the whole reason why we actually wanted to have a shipping container in the very first place. We have a freeze dryer. Now, the problem with having a freeze dryer is nobody knows what a freeze dryer is, or what it does, or how to use it, or what is its point or purpose. And as far as we could tell, they did not sell them in El Salvador. And if they do sell them in El Salvador, they do a really crappy job at advertising because I could not find them anywhere. And we bought this freeze dryer. It was only 2 years old and it was $6,000 new. So this is an item we really wanted to bring with us because we couldn't replace it here. It was expensive and it would be worth bringing on a shipping container. It doesn't take a big footprint, and with a 20-foot shipping container, we could put a lot more stuff in there and be able to make it cost-worthy in that case. For the curious among you, a freeze dryer preserves food. So for an example, we had chickens in Canada, and in the summer chickens lay a lot of eggs. In the winter they don't lay a lot of eggs. So in the summertime I would take their eggs, I would crack them open, mix them up. You don't add anything to it, just the egg white and yolk. Mix them up. I pour them into the trays for the freeze dryer and I freeze them in the freeze dryer, and about 24 to 36 hours later they've been frozen and sublimated, and all the water has been removed from the eggs. We actually have a bucket underneath the freeze dryer and a pump that sucks all the water out of the eggs. So now you have basically a hard sheet of crunchy eggs, and I would break them into squares. I'd whip them up in the blender to turn them into powdered eggs. And you can put them in a Mylar bag, put an oxygen absorber in, seal it, and they're good for 25 years. And you want to use them, you open them up, you scoop them out, add some water, and now you have eggs. So you have eggs to be preserved for a very long time, which is great when you're in a prepper sort of mindset, which is what we were in Canada. And this was a great asset. And I also thought it'd be a great asset here because here we have fresh fruit. Even in our backyard, we have bananas and papayas back there, and anywhere you go, you can get avocados and mangoes and everything else. Well, you could cut them in squares, freeze dry them. You can eat them like candy at that point because they're just like a dried up fruit, but it's not dehydrated. It's different. It still keeps its shape, and you just bite on it. It'd be like a crunchy air, almost like they call it. You could do this with ice cream. They call it astronaut ice cream. It's like a crunchy texture when you go to eat it again. Or what we thought, because originally we were actually coming here to potentially start an orphanage or help work with an orphanage or work with the orphans when they leave the orphanage. We had many ideas of how we would help out. And one of the things we thought, if we can turn the fruit into basically a powdered nutritional shake for pregnant moms or toddlers, then this is a great asset to have here. And we could use it for our personal reasons. We could use it for a business, or we could use it just to help other people like that. So this is why we really wanted to have the freeze dryer. I even freeze dried raw liver, thinly sliced, for a lady, and she wanted to powder that and put it into capsules for like a nutritional supplement. And she also wanted me to freeze dry zucchini and turn it into flour. So there's so many things that you could do with a freeze dryer. So we really wanted to have that. That was my point. We really wanted to have that, and we knew that it would be really hard to take this on a plane. It weighs 150 pounds to just drag it around. If you've seen it in our video, maybe I'll put that here. You can see right here in the video that the freeze dryer, it's heavy, and it's like the size of the small washing machine. So the freeze dryer was really on our mind when we considered what exactly we were going to do to get our stuff to El Salvador. That was our main consideration. And because it had coolant and it was an electrical appliance, we need to have the materials safety data sheet from the manufacturer, which is Harvest Right. And I did email them, and I got that, and I got it to our shipping company here to make sure that they had it all for customs. This is really important. Anything that plugs in needs the energy guide. The sticker you have on a refrigerator or an appliance when you buy it. You need to have that, and you need to have the materials breakdown of what the materials that the item is made of, so much metal or plastic or whatnot. We actually seen, we were looking at a chandelier here in one of the online websites, and we'd seen how they broke up 50% metal, 10% plastic, and 10% wood, and whatever else, right? This is sort of what they're looking for, because when you're bringing in something you're going to sell at a store, that is all listed on the data sheets that come with the items that you're selling. If you were Walmart, you have a whole box with ceiling fans, they know exactly what those things are made of. And that's sort of what they're looking for when you bring stuff into customs. We did not know that when we packed our boxes. These are things we learned afterwards. So I'm telling you now, so you don't make the same mistakes we did. Our friends did a lot of running around for us because of our naivety in this process. So be careful of what you are shipping in, because that extra running around is more work and it could cost you more money. So the freeze dryer is why we wanted to bring a shipping container in, but you may look at your situation and realize you don't have anything that is irreplaceable that you can't buy here, and you don't need to bring in a big container of stuff. It's all about your personal preference. You could just sell everything and come here with your suitcases and start over. What to bring and what not to bring. So what I'll tell you now is, do not bring in any furniture or major appliances. These are things that you can buy here. And what we had learned when we were buying appliances is that there are some appliances companies like Mabe who actually make appliances more for the dirty energy situation you may find in Latin American countries where you have a lot of power fluctuations or surges. So they actually specialize in making appliances that are more robust in those situations, where you could bring in your really fancy appliance from the US and the first time the power flickers, boom, it's dead, right? We also have a surge protector on our fridge, our deep freezer, and our washing machine. So we have 3 surge protectors to also prevent against this happening. Now, we've only lost power, like for maybe 5 minutes in this area that we moved to where we had our own appliances. But I'm just saying these things are not worth bringing. First of all, don't bring anything with coolant like a fridge or freezer because the headaches involved in that. You need special permits actually. Like for the freeze dry, I had to have a special permit to bring in that because it had coolant in it. Now for us, that was worth it because we couldn't replace that here. But for a fridge or freezer, that is totally not worth it. And for furniture, we bought all our furniture here. I got my table set, my sofa set, our beds, like the 3 kids' beds, our bed, and actually the beds are really well made. My husband really wanted a firm mattress, and Indu Foam is the brand that was recommended to us. And I said, I want the firmest mattress you have, and it is amazing. And actually, it's helped both of our back. Finally had that bowling ball bed, you always see the commercials on. This has no springs, it's only foam. And when my husband gets in the bed, I don't even know. And I'm a really light sleeper, so before I'd always know when he got in or out of the bed because the bed would move and it would wake me up. I don't have that problem now, actually. I don't know what time he went to bed last night. It was sometime after me, and I didn't know he was in the bed till I kicked him this morning. So I thought I went to bed alone. Whoops. I want to give you a couple of stories. We spoke to some people who shipped items in before us. Trust me, we're not the only ones, but maybe I think I've been told I'm the only successful one. So I'm going to tell you some stories. There was a lady I talked to who brought in all of her furniture and all of her appliances. And she had this really nice, I think it was new, leather sofa set that she brought in. And because the delays or different things, maybe the coolant in the refrigerator, I don't know, her shipment stayed at the port for a month or more. Now, our stuff already stayed in the port and there was no problems with it, so probably it was more. And because of the humid sea climate, the salty air, it didn't do very good with her sofa set, sitting out there in the hot sun, as it were. And another couple we spoke to, actually, their sea container was not seaworthy and it leaked. So can you imagine you have a nice sofa set and your beds and all that stuff in there and your container is leaking and now all that fabric's all gone moldy and it's a mess. No, you don't want that. Don't bring that stuff in. It's not worth it. You could save so much more money buying it here. Just sell it for the best money you can get in your country and use that money to buy brand new stuff here. I don't see anyone thinking that their furniture, unless it's an heirloom or passed down through generations, it's not worth it. We only brought a handful of really sentimental furniture. I brought my rocking chair, my baby cradle, and the high chair that we had all made. These were all wood items that were made for my kids when they were little, and I brought those because they were sentimental. I also brought my 1930s sewing machine cabinet because, again, sentimental, and I already had a container to bring. I had to fill it up. My husband brought a chess table that he actually traveled from the Netherlands to Canada by plane and now by boat to El Salvador. So this is a well-traveled chess table. And I have my office chair I'm sitting in now, and he brought his office chair. And that's only the real furniture. I had a couple of IKEA metal carts. The rest of the stuff is really just our belongings, like musical instruments. I got a couple of guitars here, I got a keyboard here, and then boxes of stuff, like all my Christmas decorations are stacked up beside me. We knew we're going to bring the container. We had to fill it, so obviously we put the stuff in, but we did not bring sofas and beds and all. None of our stuff was new anyway. We always bought stuff secondhand, so it was kind of nice coming here and buying new things. Like our table set's brand new. We hadn't had a brand new table set, and I don't actually know when we had a brand new table set. So I think this is the first new table set maybe I've had since I left college or something. I'm not sure. A very long time. Oh, and the one great thing about the furniture here, the country's not that big. People say it's the size of Delaware if you're American. I'd say it's the size of New Brunswick if you're Canadian, with the population of Toronto. It's 6 million people. But people deliver anywhere in the country. So I went down to San Salvador to buy my furniture, and they delivered it out here in Lourdes. Even though we have the worst traffic ever, they still did it. Everything can be delivered, for a small fee. If you're not sure about this, I have an exercise for you to do right now. You can pause the video even and do it right now. Go into Facebook Marketplace, change your area to El Salvador. okay? And go on there and search for the things that you'd be looking for. Okay, you're looking for a bed or a table or whatever. First of all, I can tell you right now, it's really hard to find used stuff on Facebook Marketplace. You will find new stuff all over Facebook Marketplace because there's small vendors that advertise on Facebook Marketplace. So that's what I found. There's very few things I actually seen that were even used. They're few and far between. So you'll find brand new stuff for really good prices on there. So look up table set, look up sofa set, look up whatever. And then you can always go to the little stores and try them out, have a look at it, see the quality and that kind of thing. The other thing, if you're looking for something a little bit more high end, I'm going to tell you about a few stores. I only knew about a handful of these when we got here. I learned this as I was here. So you're going to learn from my experience right now, all the places you can go to buy furniture. You want something more high end than what you're finding on Facebook Marketplace? Here's the list of stores. First of all, we have Sears here. We haven't had Sears in Canada for years. There's a store called Seaman, EPA, Vidries. That's a hardware store, but they sell all kinds of stuff there. I bought appliances and everything there, like coffee maker, that kind of stuff. Froyend, another hardware store. Le Curacao is where I got my washing machine and my stove. And then the other one is called, they call it Ways, but it's called Agencia's Ways. And that's where I got my fridge and my deep freezer. So they have appliances, they have beds there, they had furniture there, they had TVs, you name it, they had those things there. We did bring our two 12-year-old TVs only because my husband did not want a TV that was too smart.
I don't want a TV that's smarter than me.
Other items that we brought, since we knew we had to fill a container, were a good assortment of power tools. We want to build a workshop for youth to learn skills. Maybe we can help provide them with jobs or some training so that they can go on their own, or maybe we have them use our workshop to build furniture for our hotel or our other business. These are ways that we can help kids, have a future here. So we have woodworking tools, some welding stuff, we got a sandblasting box, we got all kinds of stuff. And, we can always buy more, but we have things to help with youth. That was our goal. We want to work with the kids in El Salvador. So eventually, maybe not in this house, but when we buy our hotel, we'll have a workshop set up there so that we can put all those tools to use and help pass on some skills to the young boys and girls here. We also brought musical instruments. We have 2 guitars, we have a violin, a clarinet, an accordion, several different flutes. We have keyboard here. We have a lot of musical instruments, and none of us actually play any musical instruments. We're all here to learn. I also brought my sewing machines, my knitting machines, lots of fabric, lots of yarn, lots of craft supplies because I already had those things, and to sell them in Canada, I would get nothing for them, and I had to fill a container anyway, so let's just bring all that stuff. So when you're making up your mind, look at what you can buy here first. So do the Facebook Marketplace thing. I have those websites for those stores. I'll put those in the description. You can look those over to say, oh, look, if I want to buy this, I can just get it here. Maybe you don't need a shipping container because you realize you are going to sell all your stuff and you can buy what you need here. So really consider that. But here are the things you cannot bring. Do not pack these items. So as I mentioned earlier, you need special permission to bring in certain items, like stuff with coolant, for example. You actually have to get a permit to bring that into the country. You cannot bring any chemicals into the country. We're not talking like body lotion, shampoo. You can't bring any kind of food, no dog food, or even like fertilizer or stuff for your garden. You just can't bring that stuff into the country. And plus, you can buy all those things here. Now, I gotta say, pet food prices can be kind of high for canned cat food, for example, and there are very few options. So they are here, maybe few options, but you cannot bring them in your shipping container. It's just not allowed. Maybe ask the airline to make sure you can bring a few cans of cat food or something like that in on your ride-in. And the thing is, with food in the shipping container, you don't want any unwanted pests. Even my Tupperware containers, I would pour out the food at home and I washed everything in the dishwasher because I didn't even want a smell of food. I didn't want rats. I didn't want cockroaches. I didn't want anything on the shipping container except my stuff. I didn't want to invite anything on there. It was actually kind of cathartic. I would take my Tupperware container with my pasta or whatever and I'd dump it all in a Ziploc bag and then I'd throw my container in the dishwasher and I had a whole bunch of this food afterwards and it was all sort of, it was already opened. It wasn't like a new box. There was a girl in our area who collects food for homeless people. I don't know if she gives the food to them or she makes food for them with these ingredients, but she was so happy and it was really kind of cathartic for me to clean my cupboard and then know that it's going to this lady who's helping the homeless in our area. So it was really nice to give her all this stuff and I really am happy about that. Most of my freeze-dried food I gave to my friends who are also preppers because they're the ones who would know how to use it. It gets a little complicated when you're talking about how do you rehydrate something from a freeze-dried state. But that was good. We got to give away a majority of our food. My husband's still going to be going back to finish up the stuff there, so we did leave a few things there for him to eat, but it was really nice just to be able to give those donations out there. Also, you cannot pack batteries in your shipping container. Just like the airlines don't want to catch on fire from lithium-ion battery fires. Neither do shipping containers. You cannot pack anything with batteries. Make sure you have remotes for stuff. You have anything with a battery in it, which I was really surprised. There's a ton of stuff we packed had batteries. It was amazing. The box of batteries I had after taking batteries out of everything. Do not leave batteries in when you're packing your boxes for your shipping container. And you also cannot have any fuel in anything. So if you're bringing your lawnmower or your weed whacker or your chainsaw and they had fuel in them, you need to dump all the fuel out and the oil, not just the fuel, but the oil. Like we had a pressure washer, a gas powered pressure washer. We never even ended up bringing it, but we did drain all the gas and the oil out of it just in case we had space on the container to put that in. Here's a list of prohibited items that were given to me by another shipping company. I'll put those on the screen. You can read it over. I'll put it in the description as well. So prohibited items, food of any kind, canned, spices, pet food, dehydrated, etc. Or liquid of any kind, chemical, personal hygiene products, shampoo, soap, mouthwash, chemical cleaning items like disinfectants or even medicines, chemical products like cosmetics, perfumes, body creams, paints, sprays, or aerosols, etc. Or drugs, obviously, can't bring drugs into the country, weapons and ammunition, pornographic material of any kind, or jewelry and money. Those things cannot be in your shipping container. Ironically, the list looks very similar to what can and cannot go on the plane, especially the stuff about money and jewelry. You can't put that in your checked bags that are in the hold of the plane. As I learned from the whole vacuum experience, that was on the list as well, that if you put money or jewelry there and it got lost or stolen or removed, well, then they would steal that too by the looks of things. And what they put at the bottom of that was, in any event that customs finds any of the aforementioned items, it will impose high fines, warehousing, which means they put your stuff in a warehouse until it's dealt with, I guess, delays, and may even cost confiscation of the whole shipment. I don't have the numbers, but I remember they said if there was a delay, the first day delay was like $121 to basically warehouse your shipment. And then the second day it was double. It was like, now we're at like the $242. And the next day is like, $384, whatever it was a doubling number. So every day it was delayed, it would cost you that much for these warehousing fees. So you definitely don't want to put anything in there that's going to cost you literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars extra, or even a confiscation of the whole shipment. So please follow the rules. Very important. How to pack it up. This is the really, really, really super duper important part. You need to pay attention here. Categories, labels, and spreadsheets. If you're not a fan of spreadsheets, I'm very, very sorry. You're going to have to be. First of all, you need to make a spreadsheet, a very large multi-tabbed spreadsheet. And you make a tab for each category of item you're bringing. Give each category a code. Ours all began with MCK because originally we were going to be bringing in our shipment as a donation for the Me Casa Kids Orphanage, and we'd use most of our pallets for the donations, and then the rest of it would just be the stuff that we were bringing for ourselves. And that is kind of how we did it, but that's not how we presented it at the port. So I'll explain that a bit later on, just because we learned as we went. But since we'd already started everything with the MCK, that's how we just continued on all of our categorizing all of our box labels. So let's talk about boxes for a second here. We found that the small, strong boxes, like the boxes that kitty litter comes in or baby wipes, are really good for heavy things like books. And when we moved last time, 12 years ago, we went to the liquor store and got the boxes that wine or even beer come in, because those are meant for heavy loads and they're small and manageable for really heavy things like books. For the rest of your packing, I would invest in boxes that are the same size or a fraction of that size. So say you have a small box and you put two side by side and they're the same footprint as the large box. This makes packing on the pallet way easier, because really packing a pallet's like the adult version of Tetris. Plastic totes, yes or no? Well, if you've seen my unpacking video, you probably understand what I'm talking about here. The hard plastic totes that we had from IKEA, they're clear, which is great because you can see what's in it. The lids don't snap on them. That's fine. We just taped them all down with packing tape. Those were the best totes we found. The other totes that we had from Rubbermaid, for example, those roughneck ones, were awful. They're made of a softer plastic, and under weight, they literally collapsed. And ones that were kind of in between, like the ones I had my Christmas stuff in, which I believe those were also Rubbermaid. They had like a thicker lid on them, and it was like a blue lid with a beige bottom. Those ones, we actually had one, the side kind of busted out of it, and it's a harder plastic, so when it broke, it made like really sharp edges. My son got a cut on it when he was moving it. So the harder plastic ones are better. I would say clear is even better because you can see what's in it. Just makes life easier later on. But do not get those soft plastic ones. They are so not worth it. And some shipping companies, we found out, if they're doing the packing and stuff for you, they don't even allow the totes. And maybe this is why, because they just collapse under the weight. So I'm going to go through our categories now. Like I said, we started all ours with MCK, and then I put B for books, right? So MCKB were our book boxes, and then they had a 3-digit number. So MCKB 001. That's how we started all of our boxes in this fashion. So books were easy, albeit heavy. So we made a column in the spreadsheet, and that's where the pallet number went. And when I was at the warehouse, I actually had a clipboard with paper and I was marking what box number went on what pallet. And the box number was written on the outside of the box with Sharpie. So on my spreadsheet, I had my column for pallet, and then I had a column for the box number, and then I had a column for the weight. And then there was a column for the count. So books is pretty easy because I would say it is box MCKB001. It's 15.2 kilograms. Everything was in kilograms. It has 63 books in it, so that's the count. And I put down used English children's book in this example, and I gave a dollar value. Now, my husband loves to read books, and of course, English books are really hard to get here. We even looked in a bookstore when we were here last year, and it's almost impossible to find an English book. And one of our goals also to help the youth was also to teach them English. So we thought having a great library for our orphanage or maybe in our hotel would be great to be able to share all that wisdom and knowledge and also entertaining books for these kids. So we really wanted to bring the books, and we had over 2,600 books. I originally priced all the books at 50 cents a book because I imagined if I was going to a yard sale and buying them secondhand, this is the price I would pay for them. I did change that later on, but I'm kind of walking you through my thought process from how we started at the beginning. You'll see how it evolved over time, because I was told not to price things too low because it could cause issues with customs. Okay, let's move on to clothing. Like I said, books were easy. You count them up, you put them in a box, you say what they are: children's books, carpentry books, woodworking books, whatever those type of books are. That's what I put on my spreadsheet. And I always put used, and that is very important because if it is new, it gets a different book value from the customs agents. Now, clothes. Originally, I was given some advice that turned out to be wrong. Originally, I was told clothes just have to be measured by weight. So I would say men's clothing, the box is, 10 kilograms. Well, when we got here and we're in our cozy Airbnb in Zaragoza, I was told, no, we need to know how many shirts and socks and pants and whatever's in that box. And then I had a little panic attack because I had no idea. I was also told if I said there were 10 pants in the box and there were really 11 if they counted them, then I was going to be charged $50 for everything that was wrong. Basically, $50 for every item that is wrong is the fee for not being diligent and taking care and, doing your list. So it was really important to not get it wrong. So I had to kind of overestimate everything, okay? There might be 10 pairs, I'll say there's 15. Because if I say there's 15, there's only 10. There's no fine for that. So just keep that in mind when you're packing your box. How many pants, how many shirts, how many pairs of socks, underwear, whatever is in that box, you write it on the spreadsheet what is actually in the box. Now, what was explained to me afterwards is that if we were going to have a used clothing store, then we could buy clothes in bundles and just say the weight is, okay, it's 25 kilograms of clothing because they're going to sell it in a used clothing store. But when it's your personal items, you need to know how many of everything is in there. That's the important part to know. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. I have a lot, and I mean a lot, of art supplies. I'm a crafter and I have so much of those type of things. And in order to pack them in the boxes, I had to itemize everything in that box. So here's an example of my very first box, my MCKA for Arts 001, which ended up on pallet 7. It weighed 14.2 kilograms. And on the outside of the box, I wrote MCKA001, 14.2 kilograms. Now, every box had its name and weight on the outside. And if I were to do this again, I would not only put it on the top of the box, I would put it on the side of the box. I'll explain that later when we're talking about unloading. It contained all of the vinyl for my Cricut machine, a small thermal printer, cutting mats, mini heat press, transfer paper, manuals, you name it. I listed it. It didn't go in the box unless I wrote it down. Packing for the customs inspection is not for the faint of heart. And this is why it took us weeks to pack. It's not like you're just packing up to move to a different house and you throw everything in a box and then you get surprised when you open it up on the other end. No, I can tell you exactly what's in every box here because I wrote it down myself, or my husband did. And I didn't put, like I said, the dollar values on everything until we actually got to El Salvador because we had some time to go through the spreadsheet because we really had to focus on the packing while we were still in Canada. You cannot forget anything. You have to be super meticulous. Also notice that I did use the word used in front of everything that was used. Okay, if you noticed on the list of the prohibited items at the very top, which I forgot to read off, was that you cannot have things that are considered new. Anything that is new is considered younger than 6 months old. Now, we did have some new items that we didn't use that we may have had for 10 or 20 years, which we did actually have those things. We were told you want to make sure things are not in their box to show that they're new when they're not really new. Even if you've had them for 10 or 20 years, if it's still in the box, it could look new. However, We did a one instance where we had a water filter, and my husband bought it when it was like 90% off. So when I list water filter as $9, it could look suspicious, but we kept it in the box with a sticker that said we paid $9 for it. Or if you have a receipt to show when you bought something and how much it cost, because again, they have a book value, and if you end up in the dispute situation over the price of something, and you have the documentation as a receipt or the price tag on the box or whatnot, that works in your benefit for dealing with the customs agents. Kitchenwares. Now you saw my video, if you watched, how excited I was when I got my Tupperware to organize my cupboards. Very exciting. I used to sell Tupperware in 1997, so I have a lot of Tupperware. I mean, a lot. Apparently, Tupperware is a collector's item now that they file for bankruptcy. I packed up all my kitchen items as best I could, and I made sure stuff like knives, for example, were wrapped in paper and either put in a box or maybe put in the Tupperware so they can't poke through and stab somebody, through the side of the box. We don't want that to happen, especially if you have friends volunteering to help you pack the pallets. You don't want to stab any of them. Another surprise we had when we got to El Salvador, we were sitting in our Airbnb, and my friend Ricardo was going through our list, and he mentioned something about something being made out of ceramic. And I was a bit confused because I thought, well, aren't we allowed to bring ceramic into the country? He said, yes, but we need to know what material everything is made out of. I mentioned this earlier on, but we didn't know that until we actually got to El Salvador. And I had to go through my whole list and say, okay, that's plastic, that's glass, that's metal and plastic together. And I did that for all of our items that we had to then give to customs. So I didn't know that in advance. Now, like I said before, they kind of want you to say it's 20% this or 50% that. Well, I didn't know those things, but I did say if it was glass and metal together or plastic and metal or silicone or whatever, right? I listed it that way. So here's an example of my housewares box. So it's MCKH for housewares. And here's box 29. And as you can see, it's 10 kilograms. I had 12 used kitchen utensils, which are made of plastic and metal, 3 used glass soup bowls, 1 used blender, plastic metal, 1 used measuring cup, 6 used plastic drawer organizers, and the like, right? You get the idea. It says used. It also has in brackets what it's made out of. So this is what we had to do after we got here. If I had known that in advance, I would have paid more attention when I was doing up my list and did it correctly the first time. So this is a lesson for you. Decorations. This is my MCKD for decorations. Now, after Christmas last year, we knew that we were not going to be staying in Canada for another Christmas. So I packed up my Christmas decorations thinking if I could only take these, this is what I'm going to take, right? And I packed 3 totes that were specifically meant to come to El Salvador. If we didn't take a shipping container, I would try to fit those on a plane or whatever, right? I had options. And then when we decided we're going to take the shipping container, I decided we're just going to take all the decorations. Now, the thing is, I did not actually go through any of these boxes to say what was in the decorations. It could have been 500 ball ornaments or whatnot. I don't even know what was there. So when I first put the boxes on the spreadsheet, instead of having a count, I had put various Christmas decorations. And they all said the same thing, used Christmas decorations. And I had various. And I was told you cannot use the word various. You have to have an actual count. Well, again, I didn't do that when I packed away from Christmas last year. And I certainly didn't go through each box when we packed the container. So again, I had to do some guessing. So I tried to guess high. 80 used decorations, 55 used decorations. These were completely not accurate numbers, but I'm hoping they were always more than what was in the box because I didn't want them to go through it and realize, oh, it's 81. Now you're getting charged $50 extra because you have 1 extra ball for the treat. That would be crazy. But clearly they had no issue with it because they didn't even open our container. I'm not saying this is guaranteed results for you. I'm just telling you this was a mistake we made. You need to do better, right? This is for you. This is good advice for you to take so you don't end up in any trouble. So if you're bringing any electronics or tools, remember I said you had to have the energy guide. This is really important. You can probably get it off of any of their websites, right? Whatever your item is made of. This example I'm going to show you now is the Mastercraft bench grinder. You need to put down other things like serial numbers or model numbers. Those are things that we did add to our list as we went. There's another one there that says chainsaw and I have it CS3116. So I did add all those things there. We didn't know that we needed these energy guide things. So this is really important if you have the paperwork to go with, just print off the energy guide, maybe put it in a Word document or something, and per each item, you can mark it. In our case, it would be EQU035, and you can say it's the used Mastercraft bench grinder, there's a model number, and here's the energy guide information that they would need to go with it. And you can have that as a side note, or I don't know how much information's on there, maybe you can put it right in your line item here on the spreadsheet. Now, everything has to be translated. If you're not going to an English country, you need to have it in the language of the country. Now, luckily, we used Google Sheets, and if you're using Google Sheets, you can use Google Translate. And you don't even have to copy and paste into the translator. You can use a function in Google Sheets. And then the function is equal Google Translate, in brackets, what you're trying to translate from your original and what language that is in. In this case, it was in English. So we put EN, comma, quote, EN, quote, comma. And then what is the target language? I was going for Spanish. So that's ES. So it's in quotes again. You put ES, close your bracket, and voila. Everything that you just run that formula down the whole length of the spreadsheet and you can have everything translated. However, please note spelling counts. And I'm going to give you an example of how this can be misinterpreted. It's a bit of a funny story, actually. I had boxes I called keepsake boxes, things where the kid's first haircut was in or some pictures or something special. It was a box. I called it keepsake box, but I had it as two separate words. Keep space sake. Okay. When that translated, I don't know what keep translated into, but sake to actually translate it into sake. And Ricardo was saying, I told you not to bring alcohol. I'm like, I didn't bring any alcohol. What are you talking about? And then he was trying to tell me what it was in Spanish. I'm like, well, where is that on the spreadsheet? So I had a little communication thing back and forth. I'm like, you need to tell me what box you're getting this from. And then I went on the English side and I looked, oh, keepsake. Sake translate to sake. Well, it didn't translate at all. It's the same word. But they thought it was sake. So then I'm like, okay, wait, keepsake is all one word. And that translates to something completely different in Spanish. So spelling matters. Really, spelling has always mattered, but even more so now. So double and triple check your spelling before you do the translation. It doesn't matter. You can do it after, but when you use that function, it automatically translates. So if you change something in the English, it fixes it in the Spanish. But it's really important that you know what you said in English. And it wasn't until I did this presentation, I realized how many spelling mistakes I still had on the spreadsheet. Normally it puts a little red line when you spell something wrong. It didn't do it on the sheet I originally did for my inventory. So this spreadsheet. Now we have a Google Suites account for our family. We do file sharing that way. So this is really helpful because I would be in my craft room. I have it open on my tablet and I'd be entering my items in that I was adding to my craft boxes. My husband would be in the garage. He'd be entering his items in and we could do them at the same time because we're sharing the spreadsheet. That wasn't an issue. However, we found the best way to do it was actually he packed the boxes and I typed it in. We did many, many, many boxes like that. And that was good because it is a lot of work doing it as one person putting it in the box, especially if you have to wrap it or something, and then you got to type it in. So it is easier with two people. Now this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it here anyway. Do not pack things that you're not going to use on the other side. That is a waste of time, energy, and money. And space in the shipping container. We've even opened a few boxes now wondering, why did we pack that thing? Yeah, I know. I said it goes without saying, but I had to tell myself, apparently, remind myself. We packed some things we are not going to use here. So don't do that. Just think about, will I ever use this again? It's like that Marie Kondo thing, right? You pick something up and you think, am I in love with this item? Will I use it again? Do I cherish it in some way, shape, or form? And if the answer is no, get rid of it. Don't pack it. Start with downsizing and then start packing after that. The best thing to do is actually just start posting stuff online that you want to sell or have a yard sale or ask your family and friends, hey, do you want my car when I leave? Or do you want this? Or do you want that? And also if you're dealing with animals, because I didn't have this in my notes, but if you're dealing with animals, we had 9 cats. We knew we could not take 9 cats with us. First of all, you can't take more cats than there are people. There are only 5 of us. The most we could take is 5 cats. But we chose to take 3. We had to rehome all the rest of our animals. So that was something we started kind of in advance. I started this probably 4 or 5 months before we left, starting to rehome some of our cats. So that is something you need to think about too. Are you going to take all your animals with you? What if you have fish or something else that probably you shouldn't bring? Or actually, there's probably a whole different set of rules for fish. I know Jenny Airy had a client who was bringing a turtle. There's a whole different agricultural meeting you have to have with somebody to go through that. Cats and dogs, those are easy. I can talk to you about that. Anything else, try to rehome it. It just makes life easier for everyone. Less stress is the key message here. I'm trying to give you all the rules. You don't have to be as stressed out as we were. Okay. This is a question many people ask. Car or no car? Now that we packed the house, should we pack up the car too? They fit in shipping containers, right? I have an emphatic no to that question. Here are the reasons. Now, for us, it was easy because your car, if you want to bring it, has to be younger than 8 years old. We had 2 cars that were older than 8 years old, so they were never going to come with us anyway. But I'm going to give you a list here so you could decide, based on what I'm about to tell you, if your car would be worth bringing to El Salvador. This is why I don't think you should bring a car, not just the shipping, but driving to El Salvador. Number 1, driving here is next level, and if you're bringing over a new fancy car and you end up in an accident first thing, it's going to be heartbreaking. Number 2, also you need to have the right kind of car for these roads. That isn't every car made in North America or the world. I recommend getting a car. It's a really good height clearance, like the height of an SUV. There are more speed bumps in this country than people, I think, and there doesn't seem to be a standard height or width for these speed bumps either. Our driver has had over at least 4 cars since we met him last year. And plus, I've been in many Ubers and other people have driven us around. And we know that if you don't have good clearance over the speed bumps, your car smacks down on the speed bumps. And one time I was in an Uber and I heard ting, 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 because then some metal's flying off the car going away after we hit one of these speed bumps. You need to have a very high car off the ground. No low riders here. Another issue is the power of your vehicle. Now, this is the land of volcanoes, so there's a few hills around here. Actually, our Airbnb we stayed at last year was up in the hills. One of the hills we had to go up was so steep that every time we drove up that hill, I leaned forward, thinking, if I don't lean forward, this car is going to flip over. Like, it was so steep. So this probably only excludes a handful of cars, but if you don't have a car with a lot of power, you're not going to make the hills in this country. The other big issue is the length. This country's not set up for the North American size, big vehicles, whether width or length. So getting around some of the roads or parking especially is going to be very challenging if you have a car that is very wide or very long. Another big thing is maintenance and repairs. Do we have the parts here, or can you even afford the parts here in this country to fix your car? There is no Rock Auto, there is no German Auto Parts. You have to be able to get these car parts in here the normal ways people do locally. So that's usually for the typical cars that are in this country. Nothing super fancy. And the most important reason to not bring your car into this country, I'm going to give you an example, okay? So you can think about this. We met a Canadian couple who did decide to bring in a car because it was only a year old and it was a large Ford SUV, and they decided, oh, it's new and they want to bring it. Well, okay. They imported it in a shipping container. And when they got to customs, they had to pay $27,000 to pay for the taxes and tariffs to bring in the vehicle. And the car was so big that they had trouble driving it around town or parking or going to the grocery store, the things you need a car for. So guess what they end up doing? They end up selling it. Now, this guy's mom told him not to bring the car in. Mamas are always right. Don't bring the car in. It is just not worth it. Buy a car here. My boxes are packed. Now what? So once the spreadsheet was all ready and everything was packed up, and we were actually already over here in El Salvador, we decided we put the dollar value on everything on the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the key. So everything had to have a dollar value for customs to go through. Now, if you're not sure about the dollar value, remember I told you we kind of imagined if we're at a yard sale and we were to buy that used item secondhand, how much would we be willing to pay? You could also go on Facebook Marketplace and say, hey, I'm going to bring in this chainsaw. What are they selling it for on Facebook Marketplace? Because they do have a book value here. So it's really important to make sure that you're not going to, raise suspicions by putting stuff at too low a value. Actually, I had gone through my sheet. I did put some numbers down when we were in Canada, just because I was, especially my craft stuff where there's a lot of little nitty gritty things. And I needed, I have a bag of beads. So what would I put as a value? And sometimes I put things under $1. So what I made sure I did was actually go through and make sure nothing was under $1. That was my first thing. And then I went through and I kind of added another 10 to 25% on top of everything. I did not want to make it look too low, because here's the thing. I think ours ended up being about $15,000 worth of stuff we had as a value. Now, obviously, a replacement value would be quite a bit higher because this is the used value of stuff. But if it was going to cost me $25,000 to ship $15,000 worth of goods, doesn't really look right, does it? You want to make sure that the stuff you're bringing in has a higher value than the cost of you bringing it into the country. So these are things just to keep in mind. So make sure your value is not too low. They have a book. I don't know where this book is. I don't know how you get a copy of this book. I don't think there is a copy of the book. Maybe the book's all in their head. I'm not really sure where this book is, but they have an idea what things cost. So you want to make sure that you fall above that always. You add an extra 25% onto the price you had for your item, and then you pay tax on that. It's not a lot. You pay a percentage of a percentage, right? It's not a lot. Think about that when you're pricing your items. And we priced everything in Canadian dollars, and then I converted everything to American dollars because everything has to be in American dollars here because this is the currency we're using in El Salvador. If you're bringing it to another country where they have their own currency, you need to convert it to that currency. On our spreadsheet, we made a summary tab at the very beginning of the spreadsheet so we could keep track of all the different categories. And what made it easy was my husband made a total row for each category, but he put it at the top. So it was row 1 on every spreadsheet. So the housewares tab, it was at the top. The art supplies, it was at the top. The decorations, it was at the top. So it was easy to grab those top rows in each of the other tabs to add them to the summary tab. So we used that sum function to determine how many boxes we had, what was the weight of the boxes, what was the count of the items in all the boxes for the entire shipment. This is our musical instrument example. So it's MCKM for music, and you can see the empty column beside the USD. That is where I had the Canadian dollars at the beginning. And once I converted everything, I just erased it to avoid any confusion. The top row has 5 box numbers. It says 24.3 kilograms of musical instruments, the box count, description, and the total value. Oh, I also see I forgot to add the word used to the accordion and keyboard. And they were used. We got them secondhand, so I just had forgotten to put that in there. So once you have everything summarized and translated, it's ready to go to the shipper. Here's our summary sheet. As you can see, I actually had a category that was just MCK. That was our first 3 boxes that we packed. We had no specification for those because you see there's only 3 of them. And then that's when we kind of made a plan of how we're going to do it. So I'm telling you to do it this way to begin with so you don't have any kind of mix-ups. And you can break up your categories into, each of your children, your bedrooms, your bathroom, whatever. You can make whatever categories you want. We just went with these because that was just the easiest for us to do at the time. So we have A for art supplies, B for books, C for clothing, D for decorations, H for housewares, M for music, S for stationery. This is paperwork and envelopes and all this kind of stuff. T for toys. X was for extra stuff like our trampoline. And then we had this rogue one, which was not MCK. It was just EQU, and that was for any equipment like my husband's tools. So think this out before you start so you can break it down into the categories that make sense to you. Okay, let's talk about warehouse. What was suggested to us was to actually find a warehouse to get our boxes put on pallets and wrapped and ready for the shipping container. We were so lucky that our pastor recommended Terry Wills from Wills Transport for this to us. He was amazing. So depending on what area you live in, you might call around and ask about warehouses and what the rates are. I would think you would at least need it 1 month, maybe 2 months. If we would have had it a little sooner, because we hadn't thought of this and wasn't recommended to us until just right when we found it, but if we had had this warehouse sooner, we could have probably packed the whole 40 feet of shipping container because we would have had a place to put the boxes. We were packing up boxes and they were going into our dining room. And then it was impossible to move around and it was impossible to then have the space to pack more boxes. So if you really want to plan this out well, I'd say get it a month in advance of the time you think you're going to leave and try to make sure you have at least another month because there could be delays, which I'll get into a little bit later. But at least have a month for you to bring your boxes over there every week or, a couple times a week and then start packing your pallets. And then you'll have an idea how many pallets you have as well. And as I said, I didn't know until 2 days before we left that we only needed a 20-foot shipping container. Because 2 days before we left on the Sunday, we had friends come over from our church who helped us move a lot of the bigger items out of our house and into the warehouse. And then they helped us put it on pallets. And that's when we realized, we have 8.5. So we had like 1.5 left to fill. So we went home in a mad rush to pack those last few boxes before leaving on Tuesday. This was Sunday to Tuesday. We didn't have a lot of time to finish that. So I'm giving you this advice because a month would have been a lot better for us. We only had the warehouse for about 2 weeks before we were to leave. So I explained a bit earlier, but when we were at the warehouse, I had a clipboard and a paper and a pen, and I would write down, okay, this is box MCKB002. It's on pallet 7. And I did that for all of them because I thought if we somehow lose a pallet, I would know exactly what we had lost. The only thing was it got a little tricky because some boxes were put on pallet 7 and they're like, they don't fit well here. We're going to put it on pallet 8. And, some things got flipped around a bit. But I did a pretty good job of figuring out where things were at. And it was more for us to know if something went missing, I would know what was in that whole pallet that went missing, or if something got damaged for that matter, right? If you had something that was damaged and you're like, oh my goodness, that pallet got damaged and that has all my clothes in it. I want to get that box out right away to see if I can salvage what's left. This is just to help keep you organized in case of emergencies. Okay, so I have another story time for you. This is a tale of woe. We've talked to many people who did bring a shipping container into El Salvador because we wanted to know what their experiences were. And I hope I get all the points accurate here, but I'm going to explain to you what this couple had told us. It was actually a family from Canada moving back to El Salvador, and they wanted to bring all of their household items like we did. Now, they got a shipping company that came and did all the packing for them. So what they had done is they went through the house and they kind of marked X's on with tape, I guess. Like say they went into their closet and they said, I'm not bringing these clothes. They put them together, put an X through it. Maybe they're going to donate them, or they're just older clothes. No point in bringing them. Or they're like the winter coats we don't need, right? So they marked everything off they did not want to pack. And then they also told the movers that they wanted all the furniture put into the truck first, and then we'll see how many boxes we'd have to bring all the other stuff. And I'm not sure if they weren't home at the time that the moving company was there, or they were just kind of just kept out of the way from the movers so that they'd have more space to move. But somehow the moving company picked all the things they didn't want to bring and packed those. And then they put those in the truck first, and then they said, we have no room for your furniture. And they said, well, no. And I guess by this time it had already been taken to the warehouse. And they said, no, bring everything back, because you didn't do it the way we wanted, then pack all the furniture in, and then pack the stuff they actually wanted. So they had actually done this in a truck, and it went to a warehouse, and then from the warehouse it got put on the pallets into the shipping container. When their shipping container arrived in El Salvador, first of all, they're missing things. Some piece of the furniture, I think they'd said something like it was a dresser that came, but the mirror didn't come, or something to that effect, right? And they actually end up with a box of shoes that belonged to somebody else. So their shipment was completely mixed up with somebody else's. And also the big thing was their container leaked, and a lot of stuff was damaged. So between the stuff that was missing and the stuff that was damaged, they had a shipper that had insurance. But then the shipper said, if you want to file a claim for this insurance, it's going to cost you $50 for everything you want to do a claim for. So if you had a set of 10 wrenches and they were missing, you have to do a $50 claim for every wrench in this set. Like, it just became ridiculous. It's 2 years later, and they're actually suing this company. So this is a tale of woe. When you use a third party like that, that's going to be touching your things, you can't really guarantee what's going to happen. So I like it the way we did better, because we touched all our own things. We packed our own pallets, except for when the pallets get into the truck, because we had already been in El Salvador by this time. Those things were in our chain of custody, we'll say. When my sons were moving the boxes from our house to the car, I was marking down, okay, this box is now in the car. And then when we got it in the warehouse and I came back home, I said, okay, now it's in the warehouse. And then when it went on the pallet, I said, now it's on this pallet number, right? I try to keep this chain of custody so we knew exactly where that box was at all times. And it was only when it was in the warehouse being loaded onto the shipping container itself that I wasn't there to do this. And this is why it's good to also have someone, a trusted friend, or like we had Terry there that we trusted with our stuff wholeheartedly, right? And even that, like I said, if you looked at our video, you'd see they actually took one pallet apart. And anytime things could have gone missing. Now, I don't know if anything's gone missing. We haven't opened all the boxes yet. But so far, it's okay. We are missing actually one thing. We're not sure where it is, because it was one thing that was added on after we'd already left. Our friend brought over my husband's walking stick. So we're not sure where that is right now. We're not sure how it got into the pallet, but we're still looking. We're ready to go. Who do I call? So now you have all your boxes packed. You have them at the warehouse. You're putting them on pallets, making sure they don't exceed the 42 by 48-ish dimensions of your wooden pallet. And the 7.5 feet in height if you get an 8-foot container, or I guess 8 feet if you get an 8.5-foot container. You got to make sure that it's going to fit properly and you have them well stored. Now what do you do? Like I said, we were in El Salvador when our stuff actually got picked up from the warehouse. If you work your timeline backwards from the date you actually want to move, you should aim to have your container picked up just before you leave if you want to be there to see your stuff go on the container, or like we had some trusted friends who helped do that. We left Canada on August 20th. Now, originally, our container was supposed to be picked up on Labor Day weekend, which is the first Monday in September. Now, I had to tell our shippers here, okay, that's a holiday in Canada. The warehouse is closed. You can't do that day. And then, like I said, that company completely fell through, and we had to scramble to get another company. And they said, oh, we can come on September 30th. Well, you know, that's a new holiday in Canada too. They couldn't come that date. So our stuff never even got picked up until the first week in October sometime. I don't even know the exact date now because it kept changing. But it was around the first week of October it was picked up. So it was in the warehouse an extra month longer than we anticipated. So that's why I said if you're booking a contract with the warehouse, try to tack another month on there just in case. At least if they have the space. If you use it, you pay for it. If you don't use it, you don't. But if they don't have the space, you might be in trouble. So just make sure you get enough time there with the warehouse. And if your shipper isn't the company that brings your items to the port, you may want to work this out with your warehouse in advance. Maybe the warehouse themselves could load everything onto the container to bring it to the port if they're two different companies. Like, we didn't know ours was two different companies at the beginning, and it ended up being the same company in the end, but this is an option. If you are in a warehouse space, you're packing everything there and you say, okay, ready to go. And if the warehouse itself can either bring your stuff to the port and maybe pack it in a container there, I don't know if that's how they do it. What they did tell us is that they would bring the container from the port to the warehouse, pack it there, and I guess then it gets sealed and then taken away. I don't know if they do it the other way around, but you know, ask questions so you understand the process, because I didn't realize that's how they were going to do it, that they're going to bring the container to the warehouse. So somebody had to go to the port first, pick it up, and then bring it to the warehouse, fill it, and then bring it back to the port. Whereas if it's your actual shipper, they're already at the port, then they just come from the port with the container. So these are all different options. Maybe you even bought your own container because you want to keep it. That is also an option. If there is an option where you can have it on a truck brought to the port and then put your pallets with a forklift into your container at the port, I would make sure that your shrink wrap pallets are well identified, you know, all around the pallet with your name, phone number, address, email, all that stuff, just in case, you know, something gets lost at the port. It's actually best to pack it in the warehouse and seal the container like we had that little seal on the back of the lock. That way you know that everything is there that belongs to you and this is all of your container. Now my stuff's on the boat. What did I expect? You need to be super patient. Our stuff left Canada at the beginning of October. It arrived in El Salvador somewhere around the end of November, but it didn't come to our house until the end of December. We were notified that it was outside the port somewhere around the last weekend of November, but it took that long for it to get through whatever the customs or whatever the paperwork they were doing. They had to come up with whatever the taxes and tariffs we'd have to pay were, and then we finally got the stuff brought over to our home on December 22nd. And ours took that long with absolutely no issues. Now, one thing they told us is that if there is no issues, you will get the green light. And if there are issues, you get the red light, and nobody wants the red light. The red light's bad. The red light's going to cost you time, money, and all this other stuff. That's why that spreadsheet's really, really important. You don't want to cause the red light to happen, okay? So when you're going through your spreadsheet with your freight forwarder, I mean, this is a funny story, but one thing came up was, what is this thing? And I looked, and it's a fabric lunchbox. So I had to describe what the fabric lunchbox was. Actually, I found it online, sent a picture. This is what I'm talking about. Sometimes they don't translate well, right? It didn't make sense. So maybe even taking pictures is another way to do it of your items. I mean, I found this online, but I mean, you could have taken pictures of your stuff. If you're going to go with a shipping company that's going to offer you this insurance and all this stuff, I would take pictures of everything, especially anything expensive, big pieces of furniture and whatnot. So you know what the condition was when it left your house, and then when it arrived, you could take pictures and say, hey, that's not the same. I need this insurance claim. Another story time. As I mentioned at the beginning, we originally were going to just bring in most of the shipping container was going to be a donation, and we'd have a few pallets of the stuff that we're going to keep for ourselves. And that is sort of how we did it. There's quite a few donations here. I just have to get through the stuff to find them all, especially with clothing and stuff for babies, because I brought all of our kids' stuff. But we decided to do differently because there's different taxes and tariffs depending on how you're bringing stuff in. Like if I was Walmart or somebody and I was bringing in all new items to sell, there's a whole different set of taxes and tariffs for that than there would be for me bringing in used clothes. And if I was even bringing in used clothes to sell in a store, that's different than me bringing in used clothes that I'm going to wear on my body, or, you know, in this case, donate some stuff. We decided actually the best course of action for us, and again, we didn't even decide this until we got to El Salvador, was we have a business in Ontario still. It's for sale. Anyone wants to buy a motel. And we had that business sell all of our belongings to our business in El Salvador. So it was a business-to-business transaction. And how that was more advantageous to us because we actually had an official receipt from our business in Canada that said we have these items and they're worth this dollar value, and including, you know, the tax numbers, the GST numbers, and all that stuff. All that official stuff was on there. So it was a fully official receipt. And our business here in El Salvador bought those items, used items, for that value, right? So this worked out really well for our stuff. I cannot guarantee this is how anyone else can do it. And maybe we can somehow offer this service to some other people. I mean, our business is for sale in Canada right now, but maybe there's other options. But this was definitely an easy way to bring things in for the tax part of it, because if you bring stuff in like as a household, if you're a diaspora, you have all kinds of tax advantages because you're allowed to bring in so much stuff that's duty free. If you bring stuff in as a donation, it's another thing, but then the person who's receiving it has to be the one at the port signing off on it. They'd have to do stuff with their taxes because now they received this donation. I don't even know all the ins and outs. I can't even pretend to know. This is how we did it because this worked out best for us. It's not like we got away with not paying taxes. It was just the simplest way to do the tax part of it for the importing of shipment. So how much did this actually cost? I know that the impatient ones watching this video have skipped to the end right now to watch this part. I don't blame you. Asking every shipping company that I talked to how much this was going to cost was like a riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a mystery, because there was no really good definitive answer, especially when they wanted to know what we were bringing before I'd even packed anything. So I'm going to share with you what our costs were, with the disclaimer that yours may be different, probably will be different because we have different values of items that we're bringing, I'm sure. Yours could be more or could be less based on your own personal situation. Here is what we were originally quoted that it was going to cost us. And this is just the shipping part from Smiths Falls to the port. They said $19.50 plus the IVA, which is 13%. And then shipping from Canada to El Salvador was going to be $7,950 plus the IVA, again, 13%. And then this customs fee, which was $450 plus the IVA. So that was going to total $11,695.50 with the taxes included. And that's just from getting it at our warehouse to El Salvador no taxes, no tariffs, no unloading, no truck to get it to our house, mainly because we didn't even know where we were going to be living at the time that the shipment was going to arrive. We actually thought it might arrive when we were still in the Airbnb. So we actually looked at an option of getting a warehouse for a short time until we had a house. And if our business had sold on time, we might have been buying a house, so maybe the warehouse would have been good for a little while we're in the middle of moving or fixing or building or whatever the new house. So we didn't really know what that was going to be. So it was going to be $11,695.50 to get it to El Salvador. As I said a few times, the original shipping company that was supposed to take it from the warehouse to the port backed out. And the new one I'd found was only going to charge us $1,750. And I believe because the shipper actually went to pick it up, I did tell our shipping company here to make sure they weren't charging any more than the $1,750, because I could have got that Page Logistics company to move it cheaper if that was the case. So I don't really know what that full price was in the end. And we had a surprising one. The only surprise, I guess, really, is that there was this port strike in the United States. And either that, or because so many people were leaving Canada at the time, the shipper wanted an extra $500 to get our stuff out of Canada. And it was at the same time as that port strike. So I'm not sure why this, new charge was here, but that was the only real surprise, this extra $500. So I'm still not 100% clear on the breakdown, but I'll show you what we paid. It almost looks like we still owe them money, but they didn't say we did. So I don't think the breakdown is exactly accurate, but this is exactly how much money we paid. So we paid them in cash on August 29th, half the amount. So it's $5,850. And then when the shipment was underway on October 23rd, we paid another part, $6,250. So that was including, I guess, the $500 extra on that one. And then on December 14th, we paid them another $7,000. That $7,000 covered the fee to move the container to the truck, because we had a truck bring our container here. We had a moving truck on the other side that unloaded from the container into the moving truck. That was $300. And then the 4 men to help do the move were $200. And other shipping expenses, days at the port, overtime for moving stuff on a Saturday, that was $1,150. And then the taxes and tariffs we had to pay on ours was $48.64. Total of $19,144.14. But we actually paid only $19,100. So I may have something wrong in the breakdown, but what we actually paid was $19,100 USD to get our stuff from Canada to El Salvador. And because we paid for the truck to bring the container out to our area and the moving truck and then the 4 guys, this is considered door-to-door service. So if you're looking for a quote from somebody, you want to see, is it just the port or is it door-to-door? Because that extra fee was the door-to-door, was like $1,000 more almost for the door-to-door service. Now, if you had skipped to this part of the video at the beginning, please go back and watch the rest so I can show you how to get your stuff here safely without paying extra taxes and tariffs or fines or days at the warehouse. And you could take screenshots of all the slides I put in here, share with your family, share with your friends, and just remember that this is our experience. Yours may not be the same. That is my disclaimer. So one of my last bits of advice to you all is to put your labels not only on the tops of your boxes, but also on the sides. Because as you can see, I have a stack of boxes here now, and I cannot see what's in them because they're not labeled on the side. What we had done was restack all of these, and we labeled them on the sides as well. So now I know what's in the boxes by reading the side label. This is a really important tip I think you should all do. If you stuck with me this long, please remember to like and subscribe and ask me anything in the comments below. I read all the comments and I'm sure you have tons of questions because I know we did. Have a blessed day, mis amigos.
Don't forget to hit the like button.